Hello, I am Greg Wells and we are here in the beautiful control room at Studio La Fabrique. We are at the tail end of doing my first week here at Mix with the Masters, which has been absolutely incredible, and I hope they have me back. We did kind of an interesting approach where I think it's safe to say that most of the masters that come here will sometimes record a band, or they will just show the mixing process that they do and get into that with the attendees that are here. We all came up with the idea of me showing up with an artist that I'm working with and some songwriters, and we very bravely, and we pulled it off. We wrote a song from scratch here and then recorded it with me producing the recording, and then I mixed it. And then the last 2 days of the seminar have been me listening to the attendees' work and being very interactive with it, commenting on it, from everything from mixing elements to production suggestions to the songwriting itself, and all points, micro and macro with that. So what we're going to do right now is we have 10 questions that were chosen from readers of the amazing Sound on Sound magazine, and I'm just going to launch into them. I've had a quick kind of read through them, and they're good questions. Here we go. So question number 1 is from Rob, and he asks, how do you go about choosing a mic for a vocalist? I understand that you try to avoid a mic that enhances the bad characteristics of a voice, but do you choose a particular mic for a particular vibe, i.e. rock, ballad, pop? And can you please explain what it means when someone says that a particular mic takes EQ well? The vocal, if you have a vocalist on a track, for me that is the key instrument. It is the general of the army. It leads the charge. Everything is there to serve the lead vocal. And when the lead vocal sounds great and feels really confident, really natural, it makes everything sound better. And I have really learned this one the hard way. I was guilty in my early years of mixing and producing. I'm such a musician. I just want to hear. What I mean by that is, like, I'm really interested in what's the drummer doing, what's the bass player doing, what's that synth programming, what patch is that, what keyboard is that I would sometimes lose focus on the lead vocal. And at some point the penny dropped for me that actually not only were my lead vocals not loud enough, but everything sounded better. The track sounds better when the lead vocal is on the right microphone, has the right EQ, has the right compression, has whatever it needs to speak the clearest and the most sort of unself-consciously over the track. So mic choice is super duper important to me. Sometimes the best mic is one of the cheapest mics, like a Shure 57 or a 58. Those are great vocal mics. The Shure SM7 is about a $400 US dollars mic. It's fantastic. And at my studio I have all those mics, and I have a beautiful 47 and a 250, which is a cardioid 251. Both of those mics are new mics made by Telefunken USA. Very much made to emulate the original vintage mics, and they have some extra ingredients in them, and the 47 has a tube that we can't even get anymore. There's sort of tweaky versions that I worked on directly with them. I find that between those two mics and a couple of different mic pre-choices I have a lovely vintage 1073, which is nice and creamy and kind of rich, and then I have probably my favorite mic pre is made by Undertone Audio. The great Eric Valentine is making fantastic gear. I also have his console. I was his first customer as a console owner. And he makes a mic pre that is just ridiculous. It's unbelievable. He makes a single space one mic pre with his EQ, which is sort of just glorious, crazy EQ. You can do all kinds of things with, including even changing the phase with EQ. And then he makes a unit where it's just 4 mic pre's with no EQ, and I have both of those. Those are big choices to make, like what's the right mic pre. So, you know, microphones are very unnatural things. This whole recording process is a very bizarre, weird, unnatural thing, and I'm never bored by how unnatural we have to get sometimes to make things just feel, you know, as natural as possible, to let the music just come through the speakers. So microphones, I've never seen a microphone that knows how to record an S properly or lots of consonants. There are some singers who are fantastic singers that don't sound good on microphones. They have an S that can just rip your head off. And then there's some singers that they're almost like photogenic on them. You know, how some people just have a quality on camera, not me, but they just kind of explode on camera and they look amazing, even sometimes more amazing than they do in real life. Some singers are like that too on the mic. There are definitely some voices that the microphone, whatever microphone it is, loves. And all of those things are of the utmost importance to me. Not only because I think most people in the world only listen to the singer. They don't really care what the track is doing, what the accompaniment is doing. The accompaniment is really secondary. Of course, there's no song without it, but it's there to support the vocal. How close the singer is to a microphone is also really important. Most of the time on modern pop music or any kind of modern sort of commercial music, the singer should be pretty close to the mic. But sometimes the difference of, you know, several centimeters, a couple of inches makes a big difference. It changes the vibe entirely. The last part of Rob's question, can you please explain what it means when someone says that a particular mic takes EQ well? I'm not really sure what that means. Because, you know, certainly all mics sound different, but it's the thing that you're miking that really sounds the most different. So I don't know. It's really about the singer, the source of the sound, and whether or not EQ is going to help or not. I would recommend recording vocals with some sort of high-pass filter in. Some people are really bold with that, and they roll out, you know, like 120 hertz and down. I like to hear all that stuff, but I'll probably roll out 50 hertz and down, because you don't really need that. There's very few singers where those frequencies are going to help. I think I've covered that, probably more than I should have. I'm giving caffeinated answers. Let's go to question number 2 from Mika. How do you treat drums in a mix? I'm a drummer, so I'm really sensitive to that. I have been accused of overdoing the drums, having louder drums than needed, but I think it's just my skewed perspective of being a drummer and just sitting at the drum kit for decades and kind of hearing it that way. I do love the excitement of loud drums if it's right for the song. You know, again, drums are accompaniment. They're also the foundation of the whole house that you're building. The drum sound, when you get the drum sounds right and the vocal sounds right, first the vocal, but then drums are right next. They're just below the vocal in terms of importance to me. When you get drum sounds right, then you're kind of off to the races, and then everything, it's much easier to build out from there. So there are many choices you can make with drums. They're such loud instruments even when you play them quietly. So there's a lot of information being output. Room mics can do a lot for a drum sound. You know, we did an amazing thing here. One of the attendees, Manu, is a great engineer, and he was helping me record the song that we wrote here. And he did something I've never seen anybody do. He mic'd the snare bottom in stereo with 2 mics. So if this is like, here's the snare drum and the kick is there, he made sure that both mics were the same distance from the kick drum so that we're not going to get some crazy phase issue with the kick. And I thought, that's a little eccentric, but then I heard it and it was really beautiful. Turning up the stereo bottom head, it's like, makes me want to mic the top of the snare in stereo as well. Pretty cool. There's lots of experimenting you can do. Sometimes the best drum sound is 1 mic with a bunch of compression. I think that Mika's question was more about mixing. Well, it says mix, so I know it was, but you know, the way that you capture the drums really informs how, what the choices you can make in mix land. The last thing I'll say about recording drums at my studio in Los Angeles, that we have, I think, about 14 mics on the drums. That doesn't mean we use all of them. You can still go down to 1 or 3 or whatever combo, but it's there as an option. I like to collect stuff like, kind of like, you know, like the Hubble telescope. Like, I want to see everything, and then I can choose to do with each element what I want to do with it, but I want to make sure I've got it in the best way. So mix-wise, it really is so dependent on the track, and there is no one answer for that. I think you have to be very sensitive to what serves the song and the singer the most. Sometimes quiet drums are the way to go. Sometimes super aggro drums are the way to go. Sometimes loads of room mics are the way. Sometimes Jackson 5 dry is the best sound. You know, sometimes there's drum replacement. I like to use Trigger by Stephen Slate. That thing is just solid. It sounds amazing. It's easy to use, and you can use his samples. You can use whatever samples you want to put in there, and that's a big help. And certainly a lot of the big mix engineers all do that. I'm not sure that they all talk about it, but I know for a fact that pretty much all of them are adding drum samples to mixes. I know that, to mention Eric Valentine again, he will do that, but it's usually quite supplementary, and he has a way of just attacking the drums and doing all kinds of things with the actual snare drum and the actual kick drum, where it kind of almost turns it into the consistency of having a sample in the mix. It's really interesting. There's so many ways to go about it, but you have to be sensitive to what serves the song. We're all here to, you know, we're all in total servitude to what's best for the thing that we're trying to make not suck through the speakers. Okay, question number 3. This is from Anton. Reading the literature on mixing audio, semantic terms like box, mud, and air are often used, but often have vague descriptions, or in fact are contradicted by other authors. How do you correlate the objective characteristics of the sound with the subjective descriptors? What do these 3 terms mean for you? So, you know, the one that I hate the most is warm. We're going for that warm sound. Like, what does that mean? Especially if you're in the world of hi-fi home audio, then when people start talking about warm, that usually means they have no idea what they're listening for, or maybe they're deaf, I don't know. You know, it's different for everybody. Like, I will say, oh, that sounds like a record, but there's no, you know, there's no objective definition of what that is. It means something to me. It's not necessarily the same thing to anyone else. I certainly know what air implies. You know, it's not low frequencies. It means hello up there. So probably, you know, anything above like 15K and up, maybe 12K and up. That's sort of like the tip top of what we're able to hear. I think men stop hearing around 19,000, 20,000 vibrations per second, kilohertz. And women can typically hear a little bit higher, 21K, 22K. Of course, sound continues way above what we're able to hear. And I feel like we can perceive that somehow, but we're not really like hearing it. It's more like you're feeling it somehow. So that's air. Air is nice. It's very easy to overcook too much high-end information. There's something that I used to do that all the time when I was younger. I would use oral exciters, and I loved the fact that it sounded really pristine and really clear on top. That was exciting for me because I grew up, you know, in a small town in Canada where we didn't really have any great mics or great gear. I mean, nobody was recording anything. It was just live bands, and I spent most of my teens playing a kind of a broken drum set and just terrible guitars, and everything sounded very boxy, muddy, and no air. and cold, not warm. We were cold in Canada. So I became obsessed with like kind of super high fidelity, and when I listened back to that stuff, I was just totally overblowing the top end. So there is a way to have things be present and create that feeling of air on top without actually cranking a bunch of super high end. You got to really be careful with that. It's just like cooking. You just don't, you know, salt is nice, but when you oversalt the food, nobody can eat it. High frequencies are definitely like that. You got to do it to taste. You got to find the right balance. And there are different types of salt. So box, I think box just means boxy, like kind of usually lower mids, sort of ugly frequencies. I know I was hanging out with Michael Brower in New York at the AES show last fall, and he was telling me at the studio that he started at in New York that they, you know, it was the disco era, and there were a lot of dance records being made, and pretty much every engineer would just cut 300 hertz out of the mix to begin with. That was the first thing they'd do, just take it out of almost everything. And that's definitely in the area code of boxiness to me. Again, it depends on the source. It depends on what you're cutting the EQ out of. You know, so, and then sometimes that's the very frequency you want to boost. 300 hertz, 400 hertz on a female vocal is a nice thing to turn up if you want it to feel a little rounder, a little fatter in tone down there. Typically that's a dangerous frequency to turn up and gives you sort of that boxy sound. However, on a female vocal, it can be the very thing that makes it just sit perfectly in the track. Mud, I guess mud means the opposite of air. And bass frequencies are a funny thing, you know. Bass in particular, you can, it's nice to have like big, round, fat, low, you know, sonorous bass. It can also be really boring. It can also really weigh a track down. Like in my own way, I feel like I understand why Prince often would not have bass in his songs. I mean, he was an amazing bass player, and he was a fan of amazing bass players. But sometimes there's no bass in a Prince track, and it's super funky. You know, the song Kiss is a perfect example of that. There's no bass. It's just a crazy big drum beat. The bass drum is the bass in that song, I think. And low end in general, I really marvel at how someone like Chris Lord-Alge, or in a different way, Serban Gania, how they get their tracks to feel really full on the bottom and quite bottom-y sounding. But if you look at it on some sort of analyzer, there's not a lot going on below, I don't know, 60 hertz, 80 hertz sometimes. It feels low-endy, but it's actually not. Same is true on Skrillex tracks sometimes, where the bottom just feels huge. But if you're talking like really, really, really low frequencies, they're not there. And I think that that actually somehow makes it feel bigger on the bottom. It's counterintuitive sounding, but it's fascinating. So again, it's all balances. I encourage everybody to experiment a lot. I certainly have. I continue to every day. It's humbling how much there is to learn, and how every song and every mix and every experience in the studio is case specific. They're all different. Even in the middle of the same album with the same singer or the same band, the approach is almost never the same. Anyway, let's move on. Question number 4. Ahmet, do you have a working routine while mixing? Do you take breaks or work start to finish? I definitely like to kind of dive in and attack things pretty quickly and without much thinking involved, and then I like to take a little break. And that can be just turning the speakers up and leaving the room and listening from down the hallway or listening from another room. You know, the thing that immediately evaporates, and I've said this before in other interviews, the thing that evaporates fast is your objectivity. And if anybody doesn't know what I mean by that, it's being able to hear the music like someone who's never heard it before, which of course is that's who we're making the music for. We're not making it for us. We know what's going on. We've lived with the track. We've been working on it. We're not going to buy the record. I mean, we might, but we'll buy 1 copy or 2 copies at most. This is for people that have never heard it, people that probably don't know anything about music. They just know if they like something or not, if they like a song, if they like a singer, if they like a line of the lyric. That can be enough to hook somebody in to a thing. So objectivity, I think, like, once you hear something more than 5 times, that perspective really just sort of gets drunk, and you can't, you kind of like, you still have to keep working. But so anything I can do to kind of trick myself into feeling like it's not my song, or it's not my mix, or not my production, is really helpful. Taking breaks is huge. Listening to other stuff too. This is something I really advocate. And the great engineer and producer Jack Joseph Puig told me several years ago that he makes a playlist of his favorite sounding mixes. And while he's mixing whatever he's been hired to mix, he will go to that playlist, switch the input, and through the speakers he's hearing other people's mixes from records that he really adores and loves. And then he'll go back to his mix, and that can be a real quick bucket of water in the face of objectivity. Sometimes I forget to do it, but almost all the time I do it. I've been doing it for years now. In the beginning, the first couple of years, it was so humbling. I was so far off the mark in terms of the way other records were balanced. And I like stuff in the playlist that's really different. I mean, I call it Mix Reality Playlist. There is everything from Spike Stent's brilliant mix of a song called Hella Good from No Doubt's Rocksteady record. Fantastic, fantastic mix. Very humbling mix. Thank you, Spike, for making me feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And then I have, like, Public Enemy's track 911 is a joke. Terminator X did the most brilliant tracks, still does the most brilliant tracks, to, Rich Costy's mix of Get Gone from Fiona Apple's second album, When the Pawn. It has a super long title. All kinds of stuff. Chris Lord-Alge's mix of American Idiot by Green Day. Absolutely stunning, jaw-dropping, crazy mix. All kinds of stuff. And so I will listen to that, and they all sound different from each other, and they have different framings and different perspectives and different takes on what the bottom end means and how bright things are and how dark things are. But it really helps a lot. So I think more than anything, making your own mixed reality playlist is like a PhD in the way records sound. It is unbelievable. You learn so fast, especially when you go back and compare to the thing that you're working on. And then go back to the playlist and listen to other things. It doesn't have to be the same genre that you're working in. It's nice to listen to, like, something else I have on my playlist is Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly, which was done in the 70s, and it really sounds like it. But it's kind of a perfect record. And you can just learn gobs of stuff from listening to great work done by other people. That, more than anything, I think will help everybody with their mixing chops. Question number 5. Vahan, how do you layer multiple guitars, meaning pan and EQ? And if you record a guitar amp with multiple microphones, how do you blend those 2 mics until you get the right tone? Again, sometimes the best guitar sound is just one guitar with one mic, depending on the song. If you're doing kind of a more polished rock thing, or like a real heavy kind of rock thing, there's nothing sounds like doubled guitars. And something I learned from the amazing Terry Date when we were working with the Deftones in the early 2000s. He's a big fan of 3 guitars, so he'll do double track guitars, right and left, and then he'll do a third one that he tucks up the middle. Not quite as loud as the ones on right and left, but it's there. I know that Bob Rock does a very similar thing, and he calls that the thickener, the third one. On other types of songs, that is overkill, and that would be too much. So And then in terms of panning, like if it's sort of a Deftones vibe, if it's like, you know, kind of heavy, just like wall of guitar, then I like pretty hard left and right panning, probably 100%. And, or, you know, sometimes it's more like 80, 85%. I usually don't pan any instruments hard left and right. I like to feel like I'm listening to a performance from a stage that's in front of me. That's just my particular, the way I like to perceive music coming out of speakers. But for like a heavy rock thing, hard left right sounds amazing, especially with a third track kind of tucked in the middle. And then in terms of, you know, microphone blending, I have two. I know some people put 3, sometimes 4 mics on a cabinet. You got to be really careful with phase issues. I think it makes sense to mic the same speaker, so that eliminates some phase issues. You can at least tell that your mics are the exact same distance, or almost the exact same distance, virtually the same distance from the speaker. I have a 57. Can't go wrong with a Shure 57, which sounds great. Sometimes it's a bit too bright, and the other mic is a Royer 121, which is just a gorgeous sounding ribbon mic. It's brilliant on guitar. It's just an amazing thing. It does something completely different from the 57, and they're very complementary to each other. They really blend beautifully. I'm always tweaking the balance between the two, always, on every take. It changes the tone pretty dramatically. And you know, like I keep saying with almost everything, it's really about the song and so I will audition, I'll play along to the song. I think that's very important when you're trying to get a sound. You can do it with drums too. Like, don't just get a drum sound. If you have something that you can play to, you can even just stay on input. You don't have to record it. You can also record it, but get the sound while you're listening to the thing you're going to play to. If you have that option, that's really helpful, because sometimes something that sounds fantastic in the room, by the time it makes it into the track that you're doing, it doesn't speak the same way through the speakers. Yeah, I think it gives you sort of an objectivity, again, to use that word, about what is the right sound for it. Don't just kind of pull it out of the blue. And like I said at the beginning of this answer, really, the right amp, the right guitar part, and the right guitar player through one amp and one mic can be just as good, if not better, than anything. Okay, that's the halfway point. Everyone take a little breather. Question number 6 from Mikel. I heard you like to put a Pultec EQP1A on your master bus. If so, how do you set it to create the sound you want? So I am a huge fan of Steve Jackson's recreation of Pultec EQs. He's just done amazing work for years concocting this thing. He got to know, I forget his name right now, is it Eugene? Is it Gene? The guy that started Pultec, who I believe recently passed away. But Steve bought the name and was completely faithful to the original design of Pultec EQs. And I was a studio musician for other record producers all through the 90s, and I really got to know Pultecs in studios. And they do a thing that nothing else does that I've ever heard. And I was ready to buy one vintage one, and that's right around when Steve first went public with his first EQP1A. I think that was the model he had at first. I've used a few of his different things over the years, and then I settled on these 2 mastering versions of EQP1As where they're stepped. And that was on my mix bus for several years. I still have them. I don't have them on the mix bus anymore. I use them on tracking for all kinds of things, from vocals to bass to kick drum to, they're just magic, holy grail, crazy EQs. What I have on the mix bus now is something that sounds, to my ear, almost exactly like the Pultec EQs. And it is an analog EQ, but it is digitally controlled. It's called the Better Maker. And it's so convenient for me because I don't work long hours and I don't work on the weekends because I have 10,000 kids and I want to be there and to be dad. The Better Maker, the settings are saved in my Pro Tools session. So I open the session, I hear a little click, and boom, everything's there. Not only does it have a Pultec EQ section, It also has 2 other EQs that are just kind of regular EQs you can put across whatever you want to do, and it also has the best high-pass filter I think I've ever heard. It's really versatile. It's a pretty amazing unit. I think it's called the 232 something. I love it, and I love those Pultecs too, but in terms of the speed, kind of a new hybrid version, which is what the Bettermaker is, was better for me on the mix bus, more for practical reasons than anything. But my favorite setting on a Pultec EQ, especially for mix bus, is 20 hertz on the bottom, and sometimes that's kind of a sharp EQ or a more broad, it depends. And then the attenuation, which I'm still not quite exactly sure how that works, but I know it scoops out something, and kind of creates space for a bigger bottom. So I turn it up 20 hertz, probably like 3 dB, which is maybe more than most people would do it. I know CLA likes to do it 2 dB. 3 dB is quite fun. Sometimes I'll go to 4. And a little bit of attenuation. And it takes out some of the woofiness of the bottom, and you just get this like gorgeous, sexy, just crazy impact down low. Makes the kick drum sound incredible. Same with the bass. And then on top, I usually don't attenuate at all, and I will boost. It depends. Sometimes it sounds really cool, you know, if you're on a shelf, to go 5K and boost that, boost everything above that. Again, depending on the source, depending on the song that's going through it. Typically, you know, what is the top frequency on I think it's 16K maybe. Boosting that as a shelf is just incredible. Like, talk about air, it's just magic sounding. If I was using the original Pultecs on the bus, then if I needed any kind of mid-range stuff, I would probably do that in the box. But they're glorious EQs, and I highly recommend, if you can, to have at least one in your arsenal, because it does something that really nothing else does. Question number 7. Motaz. How many instruments should I have playing together at the same time? I'm looking for tips for a good arrangement, especially those behind a lead vocal. So I understand the intent of the question. It's all about the song. Like, I have no idea. Unfortunately is the answer. If it's a, you know, if it's a ballad, if it's a slow song and it's a sensitive thing, you probably don't want a lot of instruments. Maybe it's, you know, a couple of things. This is all about, you know, salting your food to taste, to whatever tastes right to you. I'm a real fan of experimenting if you have the time to do it. So you can try, you know, I recommend this. Have your singer sing as early as possible. This is what I try to do in the studio. I will, you know, play like a Wurlitzer kind of piano, or I'll do like a simple guitar to a click track, anything harmonic with a little bit of rhythm that the singer can give me a scratch vocal on. And as soon as I have that, I might tune it a little bit, I might make it sort of mixy sounding so it behaves like a vocal on a record. And then you can do whatever you want. You can change the backdrop to a rainy day, you can make it look like you're in the desert. It's option anxiety at that point. And you can experiment, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can throw the kitchen sink at it, you can have it be an A440 sine wave, you can, like, whatever you want to do. And then you'll know, because I really believe, and to me it's been proven time and time and time again, that the speakers are really the thing that produce the record. You can talk about music, you can talk about ideas, people often do. Of course, I catch myself doing it a lot. But until you try something and you hear it through the speakers, no one really knows. And I'm often surprised at how something I thought wasn't going to work does work really well through the speakers, and then the opposite can happen too. I'm convinced this is the right thing, and then I hear it, it's like, that doesn't really do what I thought it was going to do. You have to stay open to recognizing the best idea. I will often suggest something, whether it's the accompaniment to a vocal like this question is asking, or, you know, the right, whatever, anything. And and it is my idea, so it's inevitable that there's some kind of ego attachment to the fact that that's my idea that I put forth. But if somebody suggests something that I think is a better idea, I really, like, I'm open to whatever serves it. I don't need it to be my idea. Maybe my saying something spurred on the best idea coming into the sandbox that we're in, but it doesn't have to be my idea. So everyone should, you know, if you can, try to stay open to what is best for the music. And so that, you know, addressing your question, like, the best arrangement to me is usually the least amount of stuff going on, where the vocal feels supported, hugged, protected, like it's, you know, it's kind of like the lead actor in a theater play. You want the backdrop to really support whatever's going on there. 2,000 years ago in Greece, the origins of live theater, not that I was there, I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. The actors would be in the middle of the stage, and there would be a narrator on one side of the stage reading kind of from the script, and then there was a choir behind everybody. That was the backdrop of the stage, and the choir, the chorus, the Greek chorus, would you know, echo what had just happened. They would kind of recap, you know, the last couple minutes. Or sometimes I think they would foreshadow what's about to happen. Shakespeare would do that with weather, and the term for that, which I love, is pathetic fallacy. I don't know why I'm talking about this right now, but I'm completely off the plot. However, I hope you're being entertained. I am. It's really down to whatever's right for the story that's being told, and who the storyteller is, and how it comes out of them. You've got to support that. You can't get in the way of it. If you do, I don't think you're doing your job. It's all about accompaniment, support, support, support. And then, ironically, the better that the singer is at telling the story, the better the accompaniment sounds. Okay, question number 8 from Stephen. What does good sound quality mean to you? Well, I definitely know what bad sound quality is. I think we all do, but when things sound really good, and good is sort of a very wide-ranging term. Let's change that to great sound quality, because I think that's really the intent behind this question. What does great sound mean to me, the quality of great sound? You know, when you're watching a movie, and it's a really great movie, and at some point, like maybe 40 minutes in, or earlier, you completely forget that you're watching a movie, and you're just in the experience of whatever's happening, and you feel the emotion, you care about the characters, and that's the movie version of great sound quality to me. I want music to do that to me. I want to forget that I'm listening to a song. I don't want to notice the kick drum. I don't want to think about what kind of microphone this. I don't care who wrote it. I don't care where it was recorded. I want to be lost in it, and almost in a dreamlike state, you know, letting the music really get into me and let me feel stuff. So that is when I think things are sounding great. Oh, and what is the thing that really dictates whether things sound great? It is not EQ, it's not compression, it's not any mix techniques, it's not whether you're in the box or on this gorgeous console behind me or in your bedroom or on Mars. It is the quality of the song. That's what sounds good or great or terrible or bad or boxy or whatever. You know, when the script of the movie is great, I think it's really hard to make a bad movie if you have an amazing script. And then the opposite, of course, is you can have the biggest budget in the world, the hottest director, you know, the best actors. If the script is kind of broken, you just cannot make a great movie. You can't do it. It is impossible. So things that sound best are the best compositions. They're the best songs. The sound of the record is really in the writing of it, and that can't be underestimated. That's more than anything why I tried to become a songwriter. I remember playing on studio sessions in Los Angeles in the 1990s with, you know, I'd be in the room sometimes with the world's best musicians, like really intimidating. Killer team, you know, super famous people that I grew up worshiping. I still do. Great producer, great studios, and if it was going well, and if we were tracking live and we got the song in 1 or 2, 3 takes, nobody ever said, well, that's a really great song. Nobody ever commented on the song. They would say, oh, nice drum fill or whatever, nice this, that. But it was, in hindsight, it was always because the song was great. And it sort of to a degree recorded itself. If we ever had the opposite happen, where we're like 12 takes in and it's just, we're stuck and we know it's not right, everything would get blamed. I mean, people would quietly whisper, we got the wrong producer, or we're at the wrong studio, this is the wrong console, that's the wrong kick drum, that's the wrong coffee, it's the wrong whatever. It was pretty much always something wrong with the song. And sometimes songs will have sections that work really well, and there'll be a problem area, like a big road bump, and it affects the whole thing. It's really down to the writing, and that is what sounds best. And I humbly advise that you don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because they're wrong. It's the composition, it's the quality of the script. That's what sounds the best. Of course, everything else is super important. I mean, there's a particular guitar cable that I like to use that, again, Eric Valentine makes, and it is the best guitar cable. You can change the impedance on it. Yeah, that makes a massive difference. Yes, I record on microphones that cost almost as much as a car, but you can use all of that gear. You can be in a gorgeous facility like this. If the song is broken, you're not going to make a good record. Definitely not going to make a great record. Maybe you'll make a good one. It's in the writing. Okay, question number 9. Vincent, how do you get such a good bass sound? Do you combine the DI with an amp? What mic do you use? I love bass. I love bass synth. I love tubas. I love pedals on a pipe organ. I love Moog Taurus pedals. I love low notes. They're amazing fun, and it's really fun to play bass guitar through a great sounding amp on a great song. There's no feeling like it. It's really wild. And I play a lot of bass in the studio. So a few times I've had some other bass amps throughout the years, and they were cool, but a couple times I would rent an Ampeg, classic Ampeg head, and an 810 cabinet, and every time I did, I just thought, that's it. That's the bass sound. That's the one I wish I had. And then finally, I just committed and had enough money in the bank where I could get a reissue of the Ampeg classic head, and instead of an 810 cabinet, I got a 410 cabinet. I just figured it would eat up less space in my studio, and on a microphone it sounds pretty much the same. So that's what I use. We have 2 microphones on the bass cabinet. We also take the DI, the direct signal, through a radial DI. So when I record, there's 3 bass tracks. There's the direct, coming right off the bass, not going through an amp. And then there's 2 mics on the bass amp. One is this weird old mic that was made in Pasadena, California in the 1950s. And it's a company called American Microphones. The microphones look like these old James Bond laser guns from early 70s movies. They're really cool looking. They're about that long. You can find them on eBay for $300–400. And I've got 3 of them now. They are sort of fantastically not hi-fi sounding, but they're not that crunchy either. They have a lot of personality. And I use that for kind of the presence and the sort of real character, more top-end sounds of the bass. It sounds good in the lower mids too. And then I blend that to taste, depending on the song and the kind of bass part I'm playing, with my favorite mic for the kind of like low, rich tone is a 47, and a FET 47 is great too. It's probably safer on a loud bass amp, but I could not afford a second 47 that I really like, so I asked Alan Venitosh at Telefunken USA, who built my 2 great vocal mics. I asked him to recommend something that would go as low as that. sonically was going to pick up, like, you know, especially if occasionally I'll use a 5-string bass just to have a low D or a low whatever. I know it's not cool to play 5-string, but it sounds great sometimes on the right song. So they have a mic called a CU29, and it sounds phenomenal on the bass amp. So it's those two mics, blended, going through some nice Chandler mic pre's, and usually no compression on the way in. I like to keep all the kind of low there, all the low end intact, and I'll just control my dynamics just as a player. And then usually in the mix, I almost never use the DI signal. It's always the amp. That's, in my head, that is sort of the big gloopy, gluey bass sound that I'm looking for, that I really like. A bass through a DI, to me, sometimes sounds cool, but rarely. It feels a bit too. I like the bass to sound kind of dumb and, you know, simple, and the amp pack just does an amazing job of that. So if you like the bass sound on anything that I've done in the last, I don't know, 10 years, it is that setup. Okay, we're now at the final question, if you've made it this far through my not short answers. Question number 10 is from Saul. How do you deal between fidelity and harmonic distortion, knowing every now and then in the process of recording and mixing both are relative concepts, as all is distorted in a certain kind of way because of the medium? Do you prefer the old school or these days use? I mean, distortion is really, it's an amazing thing, and you know, distortion doesn't mean a distortion pedal. There's all kinds of, there's some kind of distortion happening right now in this you know, little mic that is attached to my shirt that you're hearing, but the Beatles records are just covered in, well, really all recordings are absolutely slathered, layered in distortion, but it's more like tube overdrive. The imperfections of tubes and what they do to sound is imperfect, but it sounds amazing. Same with tape. When you record things to tape, it's smearing the frequencies. It rolls off a bunch of high end, it rolls off a bunch of low end. Ironically, it makes things sound bigger a lot of the time. The minute audio passes through a tube, it's being kind of changed and colored, and I really like all of that stuff. I'm a big fan of hardware and software where you can control adding harmonic distortion to things. There's a new plugin by Waves called the Saphira, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Saphira, where you can really bring out second and third harmonics on the source. Sometimes I'll put it across the entire mix. I have a unit in my console called the Master and Servant, made by Overstayer in LA. Jeff Turzo makes great gear, and that's really fun to use. The Decapitator plugin is ridiculous, really fun. I like the Levelor, made by Standard Audio, Ian McGregor and his partner Tom at Standard Audio. There's one here right beside me that mixed with the Masters, Levelor right there. There's all kinds of stuff that helps, but most of it you don't really hear as distortion. And sometimes it just makes things sound more present. Sometimes it gives it a cohesiveness and a kind of record-like quality that if you take it out, you really miss it. It's a really fun thing to play with. Of course, like almost everything, if not everything, it involves experimenting and figuring out what too much is, what not enough is. Always compare, always A/B with it off and put it back in, turn it off, turn it on. There's different types of it. My plugins with Waves have a fair amount of that stuff built in, especially the mix-centric. It would sound very different, actually, if the harmonic distortion was taken out of the path. So I encourage everyone to kind of mess with it. It does do a thing. It can make things sound really cool. It's amazing on bass. bass synth, bass guitar, it just makes the notes sound better. Not necessarily louder, it just gives them more of a footprint, a sonic footprint in the track. It can be incredible on vocals, definitely on drums. The guitar, obviously, you know, there's all kinds of usages for it. And then you have somebody like Chad Blake, who was doing the seminar just before me here at Mix with the Masters. And Chad is a master of running things through things like the Sans amp or a Decapitator. Or I know he's a big fan of the Shure Level Lock, which is an old, I think it was for PA systems, like it's a mic pre and there's some sort of weird noisy built-in compression thing that happens, and he's all about all of that stuff. And he uses, you can hear the distortion in his mixes, but it just gives a character and a kind of a sculpting element to the stuff that he uses in his mixes that I've never heard anybody else do it like that. He's really, you know, talk about a master of so many things, but in particular, like the way he uses distortion to just vibe his mixes up. It's so brilliant. From his latest work to even, you know, one of my favorite examples of all that is the Latin Playboys recordings. Him and Mitchell Froome, and the two incredibly talented guys from Los Lobos. So I hope that helps. I've mentioned a lot of things that will give you distortion that you can use in a mix. It's really more like overdrive, not really distortion. To me that means like more of a fuzzy kind of thing, but even that can be cool. Experiment, 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 compare, try to stay objective, and go make some great music. I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you for joining me. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to answer these questions from this beautiful studio here in France, and thanks for submitting the questions, and I'll see you later. Thanks.